Welcome to the Language Fuel podcast. Our mission is to fuel the teaching and learning of languages worldwide. I'm your host, Joanna Smith. Welcome to episode number 9 of the Language Fuel podcast. Today we are interviewing Timothy Febey, who is the author of ChineseBuddy. We'll talk about that during a podcast, what ChineseBuddy is and how he got to do that. What I really appreciate about Timothy is that he's done many things in his life, and this latest chapter in his life is combining several of his talents and his strengths, and you can see his passion for what he's doing. So without further ado, I will let you listen to the interview. Now, we did meet in a cafe, so there are some cafe sounds in the background. I hope that's not too distracting for you. Well, today we are talking to Timothy Febey, aka Chee En, or also known as Larry Chinese, and I will let him explain some of those names. But he is the author of a fantastic resource called ChineseBuddy, so we're very excited to have you here, Timothy.
Yes, thank you.
All right, now before we get talking about ChineseBuddy and how you got into that and what that's all about, I wonder if we could just rewind the clock a bit and talk about how you, an American living in New Zealand, come to be actually fluent in Mandarin. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about your own language learning journey?
Yeah, well, it pretty much started back in university for me. I went to university at the Royal Academy of Music in London, and I was studying music composition. And it came close to the time of graduation, and I think reality was beginning to set in, that I actually had to enter the workforce.
Yeah, earn some money.
And I was a licensed music teacher in England, or still am. And essentially a friend had suggested, why don't you do a CELTA course for teaching English? And so I thought, that'd be quite interesting. So I went ahead and did the course. And then pretty much I graduated, and just after graduation, I spoke to one of the teachers at my school, and I saw him in the hall speaking to Chinese students. So he was an English Caucasian,
speaking Chinese
to his
fluently. Chinese students.
And it was just, I was blown away.
Wow.
And so I talked to him. I said, how long does it take to learn? And he said, it takes at least 5 years to become reasonably fluent. And so that kind of stuck in my mind, and I kind of began on my pathway of trying to look for a job. I went to Europe. I went to Holland first. I had studied at the Music Academy for a term there.
Okay.
And so I tried to find a job, teaching English or music or anything, and I just couldn't find anything. And so that conversation with that teacher stayed in my mind. And so he was basically, it served as an encouragement for me to, look to Asia.
Okay.
And so I found a job online in Taiwan, and I thought, I have
an English teacher.
As an English teacher,
yeah.
And had some student debt, and I thought, why not go to Taiwan? And so I landed in Taiwan, and 1 year turned to 2 years, and then 2 years turned to 11 years, and during that time I decided, I don't want to continually eat the same thing over and over again. I want to have some more, variety and more options. So I began learning Chinese.
Fantastic.
And never stopped. And to this day, I still consider myself a learner.
A learner, yeah. We were talking earlier, and I guess you would consider yourself an advanced learner, though, right? By now.
Yeah, the language schools would consider me that, for sure. Just very passionate about continuing, to grow my ability, for sure.
Awesome. So you've mentioned a little bit about your journey towards becoming a teacher, and you did get some teacher training with that initial CELTA course, and that's certainly very, very popular with a lot of language teachers. Can you tell us about some of the highlights in your, I guess, first of all, your English teaching career, and then maybe I know later on you also taught Chinese. So you want to tell us some fun teaching stories that stand out in your memory?
Well, there's certainly a lot of highlights there. Some of them good, some of them bad, but
we all have a varied experience.
But I guess maybe something that maybe jumps out of my mind most recently is actually, which is really where my passion lies, is that combining my musical background with my language teaching. And so I've written a load of Chinese songs, language learning songs for language learners, for Western children especially. And recently my wife gave birth to our second son.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I was sitting in the hospital, and I was sitting down with my son in the lounge, and there was another boy that walked in from a local school. And I started talking with him. He was asking how old, my son was. I said, only 2 days. And he said, I have a brother, and he's born today.
Oh, so sweet.
Yeah, really sweet kid. He's in primary school, right? And he started talking, and he didn't even know. He didn't know anything about my background, who I was, or anything. And he just said, oh, I'm learning Mandarin at school. And I said, oh, really? And he said, yeah, I'm really enjoy it. It's really fun. And we sing songs and we do stuff.
Oh, wow.
And I said, oh, do you know a song that's Ni hao, wo jiao tin? And then he goes, yes. Zai jian, zai jian. He sang the second half of the song.
Yeah.
And I just kind of smiled because that's a song that I wrote.
Fantastic.
So I had no connection to him. But the exciting thing is that he had, without knowing him, that I had influenced his learning experience in some small way.
For the better too, because he's actually enjoying that.
Yeah. I could see he had a smile, and he was excited to tell me that he was learning. So it's been kind of a course, with ChineseBuddy, is that I've been able, because of the internet, because of technology, that probably the biggest highlight for me is that my teaching has been able, because of that technology, to expand beyond the classroom. Has been able to grow to something much bigger, where I can share my songs and my teaching ideas and game all these things with a larger audience.
That's fantastic, and I'm actually quite impressed also that the teacher at the school, whichever school that was willing to try new things, and your music, and you mentioned putting your two passions together, the music and the language, and I think it's fantastic. And we were talking a little bit earlier that not all teachers are comfortable teaching with methods that are not their own, or with novel methods, but good on that teacher for trying something a bit different, and obviously successfully. So that's great.
Well, that's one of my I've noticed that in the Chinese learning market, there's lots of songs out there, but most of them are geared towards children who are native speakers.
Right.
So the content is really not suitable, or in my opinion, not as useful
for the learner.
So it's really, developing songs that have practical language, language every day. They can use it every day. It's very practical. It's great for them, and just creating simple, fun melodies, which are always exploding from my head. As a musician, I'm always I'm listening to music. I'm always thinking and analyzing and so it's a really fun, enjoyable process for me. And now that I can extend that into my other passion of language learning,
well, that's fantastic. When you find your niche, the passion just overflows, doesn't it?
Exactly.
So have you published, I guess, books with these songs in them? Is that how they're getting to the schools, or is that all part of ChineseBuddy?
Well, ChineseBuddy has different avenues. One of them is that I have a pretty strong YouTube presence. So I do put songs, not all my songs, of course, but I'm in the process of building more writing, and then putting those on to YouTube. So trying to build up that platform. So you can hear the songs on YouTube. You can also purchase the songs with PowerPoints and Keynote and PDFs that are on my website as well. So those are really the two places in which people get a hold of them.
Fantastic. And on YouTube, is this where the Larry Chinese, is that the stage name that you're using there?
Oh, Larry Chinese, Larry,
Who's Larry? When does he come out?
Oh, Larry's an old character, because I taught a primary class in Taiwan, English at the time. And I came into class one day wearing contacts. And they were very young kids, and they said, oh, Timothy? Because I had very dark rim glasses, much bigger, and hiding my face a little bit more than these. And so I jokingly said to them, I said, oh, I'm Teacher Larry. So Larry just kind of, from that, I just kind of my alter ego of Larry Chinese. So I use that character, and I'm able to, in a way, because I'm naturally actually a very introverted person. I don't like public speaking, but I suddenly get in front of a class, and it's almost like a switch goes on. And so Larry Chinese is just another way, maybe in a way for me, an aid, a teaching aid. It's for me to suddenly leave that introverted personality and get out of my skin and be more engaging and animated and hopefully excite children in the process to the world of Mandarin.
I think that's fascinating, just that whole idea that, teaching is a bit of a performance, and I think I definitely resonate that with myself. And I'm not an introvert, but even as an extrovert myself, I know that there is a different kind of a persona that appears in front of the classroom, and I think it's you've got to nurture that, and you've got to feel very comfortable wearing that in the classroom and taking it off to be yourself at the end of the day. So that's a very, very interesting process. So tell me a little bit more also about the idea of the physical movement. I've seen a couple of your YouTube videos where you're talking about using sort of actions as you're learning Chinese. Tell me a bit about that.
Well, basically, when I first was, I had my first job in Taiwan. The school that I was working with, they talked a lot about something called, total physical response learning.
Yes, TPR. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, TPR, and it was originally introduced by a man named Dr. Asher. I think James Asher. James was his first name. And so he just basically realized that the more senses that were being activated in the learning process, like touch, it's a further sense that you're having, and the motion and the action of doing things, that students responded very well in remembering words and vocabulary, and were more, especially with children, were much more engaged in the learning process. Because children love the movement. They love
They're
the
naturally kinesthetic, aren't they? They're just moving all the time.
Yes. And so that, I had never, at that time, I didn't really go down that road. I'd heard about it and people were talking about it, but I never really decided to integrate that into my classroom, into teaching. And then when I came later, after 11 years in Taiwan, and I came here to New Zealand because my wife she grew up on the shore. She's Taiwanese, but she grew up here on the shore, and we came here. I started, teaching Mandarin, and I realized, wow, it's really hard for kids to remember vocabularies. So I began researching this more and thinking, well, how can I make something that is the quote-unquote impossible Everest of, language learning projects, how can I make this more, a lot more easy and manageable for children? And so that's when I got into looking into gestures, and I looked at other research. There's been a lot of research into it, and realized that the research all pointed towards that when students are feeling a language in their hands, they're speaking a language, they're hearing a language, they're feeling it in their hands, they're seeing, grammatical structures and sentence patterns before their eyes, because they're knowing that I do this gesture at the beginning of this when I start speaking, and I do this other thing in the middle, and this at the end, blah blah blah, and they're visualizing, they're feeling, they're hearing, all this sort of sensory input is coming into them, that it's
easier to stick.
Deeply affects the memory. And
fascinating. So I just to expand that out a little bit, I'm very familiar also with the idea of, using as many senses as possible. So we're sitting here obviously in a cafe and just looking at your latte, for example, the hot glass on your hands and the smell of the coffee and that sort of thing, and hearing the coffee grinder in the background and remembering the word for latte through all of those different senses. I get that, but I think you're talking about something slightly different in that you're actually gesturing grammatical ideas. Is that what you're saying? So the beginning of a clause, the end of a clause, that sort of thing. That's very fascinating.
It's like, in a sense, guys, people, when they haven't heard about this, they think about it. It's like adding another layer. It's like, sign language. But with some, with fluently speaking as well. And so I've literally had kids who have only learned Mandarin for probably maybe 8 to 10 weeks, and suddenly they're able to recite an entire Chinese story with the aid of gestures. So the goal is not for them to speak and to always use the gestures. That gestures are there, just this engaging process, and what
it's
kids
like scaffolding kind of.
It's scaffolding, exactly. And kids naturally, when they master a word or phrase, I've noticed suddenly the gestures just drop away.
Fascinating.
And sometimes they'll still do it, but I'm not pressuring them.
No.
It's a very natural process.
So how conscious are you in the classroom when you're introducing the gestures? Do you talk about what they mean, or do you just use them and let their brains figure it out?
Well, a little bit of both. I will, encourage them at the beginning, at least when I introduce a new vocabulary word. And I'll encourage them to gesture and to move with it. But I'm not constantly some kids, are more engaged with it than others.
Sure. Yeah.
But generally, I would say kids like
love
it.
it. Yeah. On
But
the
you
whole.
always have, not everyone's the same.
Sure.
So I'm not the enforcer in the room,
Yeah.
with the gestures. But a lot of kids, because especially the kids who are naturally, the quote unquote more tended towards being unfocused, I find that a lot of those kids are the ones that really love the gestures.
Yeah.
Because it gives them
They
something
can bring
else.
their body together
Yes.
to do it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting. Just out of interest, clearly you focus a lot of your teaching time on children. Have you ever worked with gestures teaching adults?
No.
Okay.
No, I haven't so much. I find that adults often, in most of my language, when I teach, I mostly taught ESOL to adults.
Yeah.
And what I found is that a lot of my students were Asian, and just culturally, those students are often more self-conscious.
Sure.
And adults generally. I mean, you can get some extroverts out
Yeah.
there who
Yeah.
will follow along and do that, but I find that adults are generally speaking more self-conscious,
Yeah.
and more so
Sure.
Asian adults.
A teacher in that environment would probably have to work extremely hard to build up a culture of safety, psychological safety in a classroom where that would become acceptable to do
Yeah.
that. So maybe work a little bit harder in that area.
But maybe it's my Larry's alter ego.
Yeah.
He doesn't mind so much.
Yeah. Maybe they can all become Larry. Or
Yeah, he's totally on with gestures. He just
Yeah. There is a bit more to ChineseBuddy too. I know you've got a few courses out there. Can you tell us what's available online there for if anybody's interested?
Yeah, well, ChineseBuddy basically has two sides to it. One is the online learning, which we have a brand new platform which is going to be coming out. And so that's something that can be used with a teacher or without a teacher. So you can just go online and...
So if I wanted to learn Chinese myself, I could self-study with that?
Yeah, it's geared towards children.
Geared towards children,
But
yeah.
if you don't mind that.
Oh, well, I don't mind.
Some adults surprisingly are totally okay with that. They
Yeah.
want something, that gives them a certain sense of, safety, more safety,
Yeah,
I guess,
sure.
especially with Mandarin.
Yeah.
So we have the online stuff. We also have the in-class materials, resources for teachers. And so we have 4 modules. Each module is roughly 20 to 25 hours of in-class teaching material. And so that's all downloadable material as worksheets, game ideas, teaching instructions, flashcards, character cards, writing sheets, all that sort of thing. And teachers can just download that, print it out. And
So it's a full curriculum?
yes, it's a full curriculum. And so, and those, follow... I'm here in New Zealand, that follows the, New Zealand's kind of for primary school, they haven't yet fully
still
developed
developing,
those
yeah.
standards, but on the state side, I've spent a lot of time to develop that and to grow that and make sure I'm following standards. And most country standards are they're relatively similar, especially at the lower levels.
Sure, there's a beginner level is a beginner level. There's not a huge amount of difference there. But okay, so how can they get in? How can people find this if they want to look for it? I mean, can we just Google ChineseBuddy? Does it come up pretty high on Google at the moment?
Yeah. Of course, we're always working on getting ourselves known a bit more.
Yep.
So, but yeah, you can find it at ChineseBuddy.com.
Yep.
And we also have a YouTube page. So if you just go onto YouTube, just type in ChineseBuddy, or if you type in Chinese songs for kids in YouTube, I'll be on the first 1 or 2 on the first page. We'll be right up at the top there.
Fantastic. And we'll definitely put the links in the show notes as well. But just before we go, a lot of our listeners are teachers just starting out in their career, early days. What are 3 pieces of advice that you could give someone who's just starting out on this language teaching journey?
I'm always scared to give too much advice. But I...
Take a leap, Larry.
Okay. Oh, okay, in that case.
Bring Larry up, give us some advice.
Yeah, Larry will tell you anything. I would have to say that I think just being open to new methods of teaching, especially in the area of technology. I mean, we are literally living in a renaissance of information right now with the internet.
Yeah.
And that has changed the classroom dramatically so much in the past 10 years. I mean, my high school days compared to what I see the students doing now is, they go online and with Prezi collaborate for projects and presentations. And that was, when I was in high school, we had to meet up at the high school. Yeah. And, it was like
with
a
your
real...
felt tip pens and
it was like the real
poster
meeting,
paper.
like old school style,
Yeah.
And, I think it's just being open and keeping your eyes peeled for new technology, new ideas, and finding the blogs, finding the websites that interest you. I mean, I'm always YouTubing, different Chinese teachers and just seeing what they do,
out there,
and other songs or other ideas or other thematic content, and it's just fascinating what has grown up even within the past 5 years. I mean, the internet has really the capability and people's computer speeds. I mean, it blows my mind when man landed on the moon. It did not have the same they did not have the same computing power that exists in our iPhone currently.
In your pocket. That's
right.
right.
In our pocket. So it's and the effect that technological revolution has on education is already been dramatic, but it's just going to be continued to be so. So I think I'm passionate about technology, about what can be done, and so that's where I just keep my eyes peeled, and I'm excited and see a great improvements and development. I mean, the flipped classroom ideas, that has revolutionized things already so much.
That's right. Do your own work, and then we'll practice it in class, but the information is there already.
Exactly. Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you, Joanna. Appreciate it.
Catch you online.
Cool.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the interview today with Timothy Febey, also known as Chee En or Larry Chinese. You can catch him online at www.ChineseBuddy.com, and we'll put the other links linked to YouTube and so on in the show notes. Thank you for listening. If you are enjoying this podcast, please don't forget to subscribe and do leave us a review on iTunes. I'd appreciate it. See you next time. Thank you for listening to the Language Fuel podcast. You can navigate to the show notes and links via our homepage at www.languagefuel.com. See you next time.